Hey, I'm Mike Luchin, and welcome to our update for today. Today, we're going to be doing something special. We're going to be going over a review of a draft, an FFPC mid-stakes draft, which we'll do in just a moment. I'm not going to make a separate video for camp news today. The training camp's really essentially over, but preseason news. Because there's only one tidbit. So I'm just going to get to that right up front, and then we're going to jump into this draft review. So the Washington Bengals game was last night. Brian Robinson didn't play. I told you that wasn't going to happen. Earlier in the preseason, I speculated that Austin Eckler might be expendable. Well, it turned out I was wrong. It was Brian Robinson. I was on the right track, but wrong running back. Brian Robinson is the one who appears to be on his way out the door. Well, hold up a second here. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt mania is in full effect. But Chris Rodriguez was mixing in with the starters. He's the third-year back out of Kentucky. He was a sixth-round pick in 2023. He's someone who's played a little bit for the team and over the last couple of years, and he's averaged almost 5 yards per carry. Now, what he's not going to do is catch passes. So when I look at the future of this backfield, I almost kind of see this as Rodriguez is the next Brian Robinson, and Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt is the next Austin Eckler. Now, we'll see how it shakes out in the immediate future. But let's kind of cool our jets here a little bit with Krosky Merritt. If you're drafting and you want to take a shot on him midway through the 9th round, I'd say that's about the starting point for where he begins to make sense. All right, so that's it for camp news. Oh, and Chris Rodriguez, if you're in Dynasty, go pick him up, okay? Because he might be, the Brian Robinson in that offense this year. All right, we're going to jump into our draft review. Before we get started, a few people reached out to me about my rankings. I mentioned yesterday I'm happy to share these. All right, I update these daily. I already updated it with Chris Rodriguez for today. Just reach out to me on Twitter. You see at NFL Rough Draft, or email me, nflroughdraft@gmail.com, and just let me know what your email address is, and I'll send this over to you. It's no problem at all. And this is for FFPC, which the only thing that's going to be different from a regular PPR league is you're going to have to take those tight ends and bump them down around. And we'll get into why with our draft review. So for those of you who don't know what the FFPC is, it's a mid and high stakes company, and a lot of the big fantasy people play this format. It's PPR, except for tight ends who get 1.5 points per reception. Okay, so tight end premium. The lineup, as you can see on the screen, you play one quarterback, you play one tight end, 2 running backs and 2 receivers, but then you also play 2 flex, which could be a running back, a receiver. In this format, even some tight ends are viable. They're 12-team leagues, but there are only 12-week regular seasons. So the way this works is 4 teams make it to the playoffs after those 12 weeks. The playoffs are weeks 13 and 14. And after week 14, the top 2 playoff seeds, which is going to be the team with the best record, and the 2 seed is the team with the most points for the season, they make it to this big 3-week-long tournament, along with the league champion. Okay, and in many cases, the league champion is the 1 or the 2 seed, right? Because especially when there are only 4 teams making the playoffs. But say the 3 or the 4 seed happens to win the league championship in week 14, they also get into the week 15 to 17 tournament. Now, the week 15 to 17 tournament is a 3-week-long sort of just compilation of points. So think about if you play tournaments on DFS. This is like one of those big tournaments, but it lasts for 3 weeks rather than just one. And the winner wins $1 million. I was in second place going into the 4:00 games with a player left a few years ago. I ended up finishing in 50th or something like that. So that wasn't great, but it's pretty cool. So that is the format here. And since you have a tournament sort of setup where, you want to beat a whole bunch of teams at the end of the season, you want to take some shots here at upside. So let's take a look at the draft that I did last night. I was picking 7th, and as you can see, I took Brock Bowers. And if you've been drafting regular PPR leagues, you're going to look at that and you're going to say, why in the world is he taking Brock Bowers in the first round? Let's talk about what that 1.5 PPR for tight end does. This would be like saying I'm drafting a wide receiver who catches between 150 and 170 passes per game, per season. And also, I'm able to take that player and put him in my tight end spot. So when you look at it that way, Bowers had 112 catches last year. So that's, again, about 165 receptions for a wide receiver with the 1.5 PPR. And he goes into the tight end spot. Now, you might say, yeah, but every tight end gets the 1.5 PPR. Yes, but most tight ends don't matter. Okay. Sure, you can stream a tight end that's going to have a good week. Maybe he has a good matchup. But when you're talking about one of those situations, you're talking about getting like tight end 10 production. All right. There might not be a lot of difference between, say, tight end 10 and 11 and tight end 23 and 24. But you're not going to stream a week that Brock Bowers or Trey McBride is going to have. Okay. That you're not going to stream a week where a tight end just happens to catch 10 passes or something like that. There are very few tight ends in the league that matter. I think you could make the argument that it's somewhere between 2 to 4. Okay, so that's why I went Bowers in the first round. And I had to spend extra time talking about that because if you're not playing in this tight end premium format, that looks insane. Let me show you the other advantage to that. So I took Bowers here. I didn't take another tight end the rest of the draft. Look at all of these tight ends that were getting picked in the later rounds. Mason Taylor, round 12. Isaiah Likely, round 13. Jonnu Smith is like one of 18 tight ends that the Steelers have. Chig, who everybody's been waiting for years. Elijah Arroyo, who's going to be part of a timeshare because he's only a rookie. Harold Fannin, I know he's had some buzz lately, but I mean, Njoku's still there. Darren Waller doesn't even want to play football. So all of those teams are taking these shots, multiple shots late in these drafts, trying to find a tight end that will matter. When you go back at the end of the year, it's almost certain that none of them will matter. Maybe if somebody gets lucky, one of those guys I just mentioned will actually make a difference. But outside of maybe getting you through a bye week, none of those tight ends are going to matter. And you could make the argument that even if we look at some of these guys who went a little bit earlier, Kyle Pitts, Brenton Strange, Dallas Goedert, Hunter Henry, there's nothing special about those guys. Okay? Brock Bowers, if he catches 110 passes again, even if he only catches 100 passes again, that matters. That's 150 catches for a receiver. And if he happens to somehow take a step forward, then the sky's the limit. So in this format, Brock Bowers is actually my number 2 overall player behind Jamar Chase. So I started with him. Went to the second round. I was conflicted here. Okay, for me, it was between Puka Nacua and A.J. Brown. And really, it was a coin toss. Nacua is dealing with Stafford, who's been out. I know he came back to practice yesterday. And A.J. Brown's had the hamstring, which sounds like it's minor. Nobody really seems concerned there. If I had 10 teams, I do have a lot of teams. So if I do have to make this decision again, I'll switch it up. Okay, and I'll take A.J. Brown some of the time right there. But for right now, my tiebreaker was Puka Nacua himself is healthy, and A.J. Brown, although it's minor, it's a hamstring, and he's not. So do I worry about Nacua with Jimmy Garoppolo? Sure. But I also think that you are looking at him being drafted at his worst case possible scenario. He's being drafted here. Like, for example, let's say news broke today that Matthew Stafford's going on season-ending IR. Jimmy Garoppolo is their quarterback all year. Does Puka Nacua get to the third round? No, absolutely not. All right, you're looking at somebody who has top overall number one wide receiver potential, even though I wouldn't call him the favorite for that. Certainly top 6, and if you go by points per game. So I took the shot on him there, but AJ Brown was a great value by the player picking from the 5 hole. We went to the third round. I never do this. I am Mr. Late Round Quarterback, okay? But I, again, don't only have one team. I have a bunch of teams. So I decided to challenge myself. I wanted T. Higgins. You could see that T. Higgins got picked right before me. I got sniped. So it was between Josh Allen and Marvin Harrison. If I had one team, I would have taken Marvin Harrison. I like his upside. I think he has the potential to jump up to be a first-round pick in redraft next year. I think he's going to be much better. I think he's going to be moved around that formation a lot more. And there's a lot of familiarity with that Cardinals offense. Same coaching staff is there. Almost all of the same personnel is there. Okay, and now Zay Jones is there, which will help him kind of move around the formation a little bit more because Zay Jones is capable of playing that X position. All right. But I said, hey, this is a tournament. I'm looking for weekly advantages. I'm Mr. Late Round Quarterback, but I'm going to take Josh Allen here, and I'm going to challenge myself to make receiver and running back competitive on my squad. Now, I didn't hate the value on Josh Allen. What I normally do, though, take a look at what this team in the 9 spot did. Top dogs, all right? See how they took Kyler Murray in the 10th round? They took Drake May in the 11th round. That's my MO. That's what I like to do. This does two things. One, both of these quarterbacks have the potential to finish in the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks overall. And you might be thinking, oh, that's crazy. You've got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jay Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow. Yeah, Baker Mayfield was quarterback 3 overall last year. I believe Dak Prescott might have been quarterback 1 overall the year before that. You get these late round quarterbacks who will put together really big years and pop up to that top 6 or even top overall quarterback spot. And Kyler Murray, remember, is someone who was considered to be in that group not that long ago, right? And he was hurt. He had the ACL. I know he was healthy for most of last year. He played every game last year. But now he's had another year to strengthen his ACL. He might run a little bit more. I like that, along with the breakout candidate in Drake May. And it also allows you to play matchups, okay? Whereas you draft Josh Allen, even if he's playing the Broncos, I'm playing Josh Allen because how am I not going to play Josh Allen? So I usually, like these late round guys, and I feel like this year in particular, there are a lot of breakout candidates, or, Kyler Murray wouldn't be a breakout. There are a lot of candidates to take that leap and be a top quarterback. Last year in my FFPC leagues, I ended up with a ton of Joe Burrow late, Jaden Daniels late, I'm talking 8th, 9th round, and Baker Mayfield late. And that worked out great. But I wanted to mix things up. I took Allen. 4th round, I got sniped again. All right, so when the 4th round began, I was saying to myself, I want Kamara, Harrison, or James Cook. I was going to take Marvin Harrison because I almost took him in the 3rd round, but that didn't work out, obviously. When Kamara and James Cook both got picked, I decided I wasn't going to panic, reach on a running back. I'm going to take another receiver. I went Worthy. If Rashee Rice ends up with an 8-game suspension or something like that, that's going to really help him. But even if Rice doesn't end up with a lengthy suspension, Worthy still really came on at the end of last year, especially look at what he did in the playoffs. And he's someone who I feel like could really break out and take a step forward this year. Now, when I got to the 5th round, it hurt my soul to not draft Devontae Smith because I feel like that is just unbelievably good value for him. But, these are only 12-week regular seasons. I had to be careful. And I took some low upside but high floor running backs. So you look in the 5th and the 6th round, Conner and Pacheco, when they're healthy, James Conner in his entire time with the Cardinals has never averaged below 15.5 points per game. 15.5 points per game is a really solid running back 15 for the year. Okay. He's running back 22 here. So what do I have to worry about? I have to worry about the age cliff getting to him. He's 30 years old. He'll be 30 all season. Is it a concern? Sure, yes. But James Conner's never had 300 touches in a season in his career. And some of that's been because he's been nicked up here and there. But he's never had 300 touches in a season. So he's still, relatively he's got some tread on the tires, even though he's 30. So that was sort of like, okay, I need someone who's going to get me through these early season games. And Pacheco, when he's healthy, he's a 15.5 point per game player as well. You look at the Chiefs, I've been talking about it. There's no one else in that backfield. So if anybody's going to threaten his job, it would be, you get to November and they go trade for Alvin Kamara or something like that. So these two spots here, they just kind of solidified my running back position. Low upside, high floor, they're my starters at the beginning of the year. If you see what I did at running back, after that, I took some chances on some high upside. I love Charbonnet. I would have preferred to take him in the 9th round, but I didn't want to miss on him because I think that he has a chance to be a surprise week 1 starter. And even if he's not, he'll be involved, right? I could throw him into my last flex spot. Remember, you get 2 flex spots here, and not feel terrible about it if I had to. But he's someone who I think has a lot of upside. Now, if he ends up starting because he's just a starter or because Ken Walker continues to have foot and ankle issues, now all of a sudden he's probably my running back 1, and it doesn't really matter as much if James Conner gets hit by the age cliff, right? Garendo, if you watch Walt's show, he's talked a lot about him. I love him as well. High upside. If something happens to McCaffrey, he's most likely the handcuff over Jordan James, even though he's a little bit nicked up himself right now. Will Shipley. He looks like he's got that handcuff job locked up over A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon might be a little bit involved, if something were to happen to Barkley, but I don't think it would be much of a role. I think it would be Shipley. You guys know I love Blake Corum. If you've been watching my videos, I think he's the handcuff there for the Rams, even though it hasn't been confirmed. And Dowdle's got a little bit lower upside, but I really like the situation he's in. Remember, with running backs, a lot of their production has to do with their situation. So if something were to happen to Chuba Hubbard, this is a team that runs the ball a lot, and their offensive line is very good at run blocking. So I took some shots on high upside after I got my 2 just solid starters. They're not going to be top 6 or 7 running backs. They aren't. Okay, we know what they are. If they have a great season for them, they're running back 10. They're a very low end running back 1. And if they do what they've done, then they're running back 15 overall, or in that range. And when I say do what they've done, I'm not counting what Pacheco did when he came back early at the end of last year and was clearly not healthy. All right. At receiver. So I said I started with Nakua. And then I went to Worthy. I think Deebo Samuel and Xavier Worthy are pretty much interchangeable. All right, so I look at it as if one of those guys is a wide receiver 2 and the other one's a wide receiver 3, that's fine. I'm happy with that. And when I look at my wide receiver 4, Jaden Reed, again, I know that he might not play week 1, but I'm not really too concerned about that. This is a guy who has some big games. If I'm locking him in as my 4th receiver, which again is a second flex spot, I'm more than happy with that. We talk about best ball where, you want the spike weeks, but really you want the spike weeks in regular lineup leagues too. Because teams that win in regular lineup leagues, it's not because every single player on their team scored 20 points that week, right? It's usually, this is where we have to, you've heard me talk about off-season brain compared to in-season brain. When we go to in-season brain, you think about when you're standing around the water cooler at work on Tuesday morning and you're talking to your buddies about, well, did you win your fantasy football matchup? A lot of times the explanation is just like, lost. Oh yeah, why? Mike Evans. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Mike Evans had 40 points this week, so of course you didn't. Anybody who played against him lost. So my point is, you don't need every player in your lineup to have 20 points every week. You can get by with some of your players having 4 or 5 points. So Jaden Reed's going to have those weeks where he doesn't do much, but he's also going to have those huge spike weeks. And with Jordan Love healthy, as long as Reed is back early in the season, which it sounds like he might even play week 1, he'll have those huge spike weeks. Okay, he was a wide receiver 2, a low-end wide receiver 2 as a rookie, and then took a little bit of a step back to wide receiver 4 last year while Jordan Love was hurt for most of the year. I know Matthew Golden is there, and I love Matthew Golden, but I still think that Reed is fine. If you look, I took him at wide receiver 47. He's going to outproduce that. And then I knew that Reed wasn't a sure thing, so I decided I needed a couple more playable receivers for bye weeks, injuries, things like that. Darnell Mooney, I know he's injured right now too, but he should be back early in the year. So I took him as sort of my bye week fill-in. He should be healthy by the time bye weeks start rolling around. And Jaden Higgins is sort of my high upside. I've got Reed, who's got some high upside, and now I've got Higgins, who's got some high upside, so that maybe later in the year, he breaks out. I know everybody's talking up Christian Kirk right now, and Kirk is a solid option, but he's not going to prevent someone like Higgins from breaking out and being a star during the second half of the season. So, if Reed doesn't work out, maybe Higgins will work out. And if he's my wide receiver 4 and he breaks out, now all of a sudden, this team has a lot of different ways they could win. A big advantage at tight end, potentially a big advantage at quarterback. And then, this team needs Charbonnet to break out, and it needs either Reed or Higgins to sort of, one of them needs to take a step into that. Well, I guess you can't say a step forward for Higgins. He's a rookie, but Reed needs to take a step forward, or Higgins needs to break out during the second half of the year. Okay. And then again, the bench, this is way different than best ball. I'm not looking for Dante Thornton, who's great in best ball, but I don't want to put Dante Thornton in my lineup. Okay, that Raiders offense is going to run through Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Ashton Genty. I don't want to throw Thornton in there and hope he catches a touchdown that week. Okay, I want high upside. That's why I took all these high upside running backs. Bryce Young, he's got some upside. I waited as long as I could for a backup quarterback. You see that almost every relevant quarterback got picked. So that's why I ended up with Bryce Young, but he does have a little bit of upside. You might be looking and saying, Quentin Johnston and Kavontae Turpin, huh? What's up with that? All right, well, here's my rationale. I mentioned earlier, this league has a 12-week regular season, a 2-week playoff, and then you have this big tournament from weeks 15 to 17 that involve all of the leagues that were drafted. Now, some of these leagues draft after the first couple of games. They draft that Thursday. They draft that Friday. They draft that Saturday. The drafts don't end until that Saturday, when the next day is the full slate of Sunday week 1 games. For that reason, the FFPC likes to keep the rules even for everyone. Meaning, if you're drafting on that Friday or that Saturday, there have already been a game or two that have happened. The Cowboys-Eagles on Thursday night, the Chiefs-Chargers on Friday night. Those teams are still allowed to set their lineups how they see fit. Meaning, the players they drafted from those 4 teams have already played. They can decide whether or not they're in their lineup after the fact. Well, they let all of us who draft before do the same thing, and a lot of people don't realize that. So, Quentin Johnston and Kevontae Turpin are on my team for that reason alone. I do like Quentin Johnston a little bit. I know he had the concussion and it looked scary the other day, and hey, there's a chance he might not even play week 1. But I do like his upside a little bit in the 18th round. But the main reason why I drafted Johnston, and the only reason why I drafted Kevontae Turpin, is because now I can see what they do in those 2 games, Thursday and Friday night. Let's say Turpin has a 50-yard touchdown. Okay, I can put him into my flex spot after the game's over. Same with Quentin Johnston if he's healthy enough to play. And let's say, and Turpin is locked in as the number 3 receiver for the Cowboys. It looks like they're going to throw the ball a lot. Hey, game script in that game might show that they have to throw the ball a lot playing against the Eagles. Well, if Turpin doesn't do anything in that game, I just drop him. And there's a waiver run that runs on Sunday mornings in these leagues. I'll probably pick up Michael Mayer, which I usually would say that handcuffing a tight end is absolutely insane. But Mayer has some upside if Brock Bowers were to get hurt. And so what that would do for me is it would at least give me another decent tight end. You can bet that Mayer would be a waiver priority in any league, really, if Bowers were to get hurt, because he's actually talented. But that would protect me a little bit. It would obviously be a big hit. He's not replicating what Bowers is going to do, but it would protect my lineup since I didn't draft another tight end. So after Turpin or Johnston, one of them likely does nothing. I drop them, I pick up Michael Mayer, and I go on with my season. Okay, but these 2 players were drafted, if you're drafting one of these leagues, solely for the reason of, hey, if they do something in that first game, I could literally put them in my lineup. And hey, that negates Jaden Reed or Darnell Mooney potentially not playing week 1, or Jaden Higgins not having a huge role in week 1. All right. That's my recap here of this. You guys always tell me that I don't talk enough about the top few players in the draft, so I wanted to do that. Again, if you have any questions, if you want my rankings that I update daily, go ahead and just DM me on Twitter or send me an email. And let me know what you thought of this, because I have a bunch more of these drafts coming up. I'd be happy to review my team. Be happy to come back and sort of review how the other teams in this league did, or at least my opinion on that. As we get into the heart of draft season, which is really starting now, I feel like this could have some value. And these are, $350 entry fees, which, at least it shows that the people who join them are going to take them seriously. They're not just going to auto pick in most cases. But all right, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions or comments, leave them in the comments on YouTube or DM me, email me, and have a good day.